Families were told to leave their homes for 3 days. They never returned. Everything they loved vanished in one night. It was a quiet night, April 26, 1986. In a small Soviet city called Pripyat, most people were asleep. The air was cool. The streets were empty. Nothing seemed unusual. Children slept in their beds. Parents rested after a long day of work. Young couples dreamed about their future. No one knew that in a few minutes their lives would change forever. Just 3 kilometers away stood a massive nuclear power plant, Chernobyl. It was one of the largest in the world. To the Soviet Union, it was a symbol of science, power, and progress. Inside reactor number 4, a night shift of workers was running a safety test. It sounded routine. Nothing dangerous, nothing dramatic. But something was already going wrong. The engineers wanted to see how long the turbines could produce electricity after a power failure. This test had been planned before. It had been delayed many times. That night, they decided to do it anyway. But the reactor was not in a stable condition. Some safety systems were turned off. Important procedures were ignored. Pressure inside the reactor began to change. The operators did not fully understand what was happening. The design of the reactor itself had a hidden flaw, a dangerous weakness. But no one in that control room knew the truth. At 1:23 a.m., everything happened in seconds. A sudden surge of power. Control rods were inserted to stop the reaction, but instead they made it worse. The reactor became uncontrollable. Then, a massive explosion. Not a small accident, not a mechanical failure. An explosion so powerful that it blew the 1,000-ton concrete lid off the reactor. The building shook like an earthquake. Windows shattered across the city. A column of fire shot into the night sky. Burning graphite and radioactive material were thrown into the air. The reactor core was now open, exposed to the world. It was no longer a machine. It was a burning nuclear volcano. Inside the plant, chaos began instantly. Lights went out. Dust filled the air. Metal twisted and fell. Some workers thought it was just a steam explosion. Others believed the reactor was still intact. They were wrong. Deadly radiation, invisible, silent, odorless, was already filling the building. Many of them received fatal doses within minutes, but they did not know. One worker later said, "We did not understand that we were already dying." Burning pieces of radioactive graphite landed everywhere. On the ground, on nearby buildings, even on the roof. Fire broke out across the plant. From a distance, the flames looked almost beautiful. Blue, orange, and purple light flickered in the darkness. People in Pripyat woke up and looked out their windows. Some walked outside to watch. Children pointed at the glowing sky. No one told them it was dangerous. No alarms sounded in the city. No evacuation order came. Life continued, as if nothing had happened. Within minutes, local firefighters were called. They were trained to fight ordinary fires, not nuclear disasters. No one warned them about radiation. They arrived in simple uniforms, no protective suits, no special equipment, only helmets, boots, and hoses. They climbed onto the roof to put out the flames. Pieces of glowing graphite lay around them. Some firefighters picked them up with their hands, not knowing what they were. The material was hotter than anything they had ever touched. Their skin began to burn, not from heat, from radiation. Radiation cannot be seen. You cannot smell it. You cannot taste it. You cannot feel it at first. But inside the body, it destroys cells, organs, and DNA. Many firefighters received doses thousands of times higher than a safe level. Within hours, they began to feel strange, metallic taste in the mouth, dizziness, vomiting, severe fatigue. Their skin turned red, like a terrible sunburn. Still, they kept working. They believed they were saving their city. They did not know that the city could no longer be saved. Pripyat was a young city. Modern apartment buildings, schools, hospitals, parks. Nearly 50,000 people lived there. Most residents worked at the nuclear plant. That morning, buses ran as usual. Children prepared for school. Shops opened. Some people went to the bridge to watch the burning reactor from afar. They called it the Beautiful Fire. Later, many who stood on that bridge would become seriously ill. Some would die. Chernobyl was not like a normal explosion. It did not end when the fire stopped. It released radioactive particles into the air, carried by the wind across Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and eventually much of Europe. Invisible contamination fell on forests, rivers, farms, and cities. People were breathing it, eating it, drinking it, without knowing. Back at the plant, leaders finally began to understand the truth. The reactor core was gone, not damaged, gone, completely destroyed. Radiation levels were so high that instruments stopped working, robots failed, electronics broke, even cameras malfunctioned. Humans would have to do the work, and many of them would pay with their lives. As the sun rose, smoke still poured from the reactor. The city looked calm from a distance. Birds flew through the air. Trees stood quietly. People walked the streets. But an invisible cloud of death hung over everything. It was the beginning of the worst nuclear disaster in human history, and the world did not know yet. For hours, then days, information was hidden. Officials feared panic more than radiation. But radiation does not wait for permission. It spreads, slowly, relentlessly, without mercy. When the alarm rang at the fire station, the men did not hesitate. It was just another fire, they thought. Firefighters are trained to run toward danger, not away from it. They put on their uniforms, grabbed their equipment, and climbed into the trucks. Sirens cut through the silent night as they sped toward the power plant. None of them knew they were driving into a place where no human should stand. The first team arrived within minutes. In front of them stood reactor number 4, broken open like a wounded giant. Flames rose high into the sky. Black smoke rolled upward. Pieces of burning material lay scattered everywhere. Some fires burned on the ground, others burned on the roof. But this was not an ordinary fire. The glowing pieces were not wood or metal. They were radioactive graphite from the reactor core. No one told the firefighters. No one even imagined such a thing was possible. Several firefighters were ordered to climb onto the roof of the building next to the reactor. They carried heavy hoses up narrow stairways. The air grew hotter and thicker with smoke. When they reached the roof, they saw something strange. Small black blocks were scattered across the surface. Some glowed faintly red. One firefighter kicked a piece with his boot. Another picked one up and immediately dropped it. It burned through the glove as if it were made of paper. But the danger was not heat. It was radiation. Deadly, invisible radiation pouring out of the destroyed reactor. Within minutes, the men began to feel pain. Their skin prickled, then burned. Their faces turned red, as if sunburned in seconds. Some felt dizzy, others felt weak. Still, they kept spraying water onto the flames. They believed they were preventing a disaster. In truth, the disaster had already happened. One survivor later said, "We did not know that the fire was nuclear." One of the firefighters that night was a young man named Vasily Ignatenko. He was strong, brave, and only 25 years old. At home, his wife Lyudmila was asleep. She was pregnant. When she woke, he was already gone. She did not know she had just seen him for the last time as a healthy man. Vasily climbed onto the roof and worked for hours, surrounded by radiation thousands of times above safe levels. He never complained. He never stopped. He did what firefighters do. He fought the fire. After several hours, the men were finally taken to a hospital. Doctors noticed something unusual. The firefighters were vomiting uncontrollably. Their faces were swollen. Their eyes were red. Their skin was turning dark. Many complained of a metallic taste in their mouths. Some said their tongues felt numb. Others felt an intense thirst that water could not satisfy. The doctors first thought it was smoke poisoning. Then they realized something far worse: radiation sickness. The local hospital had no special equipment for nuclear injuries. Doctors and nurses treated the men with ordinary methods. They touched them, changed their clothes, cleaned their wounds. They did not know that the victims themselves were radioactive. Even their uniforms were contaminated. Bedsheets, floors, and medical tools soon carried radioactive particles. Many hospital workers were exposed without realizing it. Radiation sickness is cruel. At first, symptoms may seem mild. Then the body begins to collapse. Skin blisters appear. Hair falls out. Internal organs fail. For some firefighters, their skin began to peel away. Burns spread across their bodies, even where no flame had touched them. It was as if they were burning from the inside. Lyudmila finally found her husband in the hospital. She ran to him, ignoring the guards who tried to stop her. She hugged him. She kissed him. No one told her that his body was highly radioactive. She did not care. She only saw her husband. Later, doctors tried to warn her. "Do not touch him," they said. "He is dangerous." But how could a wife stay away from her dying husband? She sat beside him day and night. Vasily could barely speak. His lips were swollen. His voice was weak. Yet he still worried about her. "Go home," he whispered. "Think about the baby." She refused to leave. Love was stronger than fear. Soon, special planes arrived. The most severely injured firefighters were flown to Moscow for treatment. They were placed in a hospital designed for radiation cases. Doctors wore protective suits. Visitors were restricted. Lyudmila secretly followed her husband there. She hid the fact that she was pregnant. If the doctors knew, they would not allow her near him. In Moscow, Vasily's condition continued to deteriorate. Radiation had destroyed his bone marrow. His immune system collapsed. Infections spread rapidly. His body swelled, then weakened. His skin darkened and split. Lyudmila later said, "He was no longer the man I married, but I still recognized his eyes. He asked for water. He asked about their home. He asked about the baby he would never see." Vasily and the other firefighters did not see themselves as heroes. They believed they were simply doing their duty. But without their actions, the fire could have spread further. More explosions might have occurred. Millions more lives could have been lost. Their sacrifice helped prevent an even greater catastrophe. Most of them would not survive. Vasily died less than 3 weeks after the explosion. He was buried in a sealed coffin inside a concrete tomb. The radiation in his body was still dangerous. Lyudmila stood at the funeral, holding her stomach. She whispered goodbye. Months later, their baby was born and died shortly after birth due to radiation exposure. She had unknowingly absorbed radiation while caring for her husband. The firefighters were among the first victims of Chernobyl. They walked into hell without protection, without knowledge, without choice. They fought an enemy they could not see, an enemy that would stay with them forever. Their story is not just about tragedy. It is about courage, the kind that does not ask questions, the kind that acts first, the kind that saves others even at the cost of one's own life. Morning came quietly to the city of Pripyat. Sunlight touched the apartment buildings. Birds sang in the trees. The sky looked clear and peaceful. From a distance, nothing seemed wrong, but the air was no longer safe. Invisible radioactive dust was already settling on streets, rooftops, playgrounds, and clothing. People were breathing it with every breath. They did not know. April 26, 1986, was a Saturday. Children woke early, excited for the weekend. Some planned to go outside and play. Others watched television or helped their parents at home. Workers prepared for their shifts at the nuclear plant. Buses ran on schedule. Shops opened as usual. Couples walked through parks. Life continued, calm, ordinary, routine. Only a few people noticed a strange metallic smell in the air. Some complained of headaches. Others felt nausea or weakness. But no official warning came. Many residents had seen the explosion during the night. From balconies and streets, they watched the glowing reactor. Blue light shimmered above the building, an eerie, unnatural color. Some described it as beautiful. Curious citizens walked closer to get a better view. Families gathered outside. Children laughed and pointed. Teenagers took photographs. They did not know they were standing in a cloud of radiation. Years later, survivors would remember this moment with horror. They called it the night we watched our own death. One popular viewing spot was a railway bridge near the plant. From there, the burning reactor was clearly visible. Dozens of people gathered on the bridge that night. Parents held their children. Friends stood shoulder to shoulder. Some even brought blankets as if watching fireworks. Black particles fell from the sky like ash. Children played with them. No one warned them to leave. Many who stood on that bridge would later become severely ill. Some would die within months. Today, the bridge is known by a chilling name, the Horror Bridge. Despite the explosion, officials did not cancel school immediately. On that Saturday morning, many children prepared their books and uniforms. Teachers reported to work. Hospitals operated normally. Doctors had begun to see unusual symptoms, but information was limited. Radiation detectors in the city registered dangerous levels, but the readings were kept secret. The government feared panic more than radiation. By midday, rumors began to circulate. Some people heard that there had been a fire at the plant. Others believed it was a minor accident. A few workers who had been on duty the night before tried to warn their families, but they were told not to spread information. Police quietly appeared on the streets. Roads leading out of the city were monitored, yet still no evacuation order came. By afternoon, radiation levels in some areas were thousands of times above normal. Hot particles stuck to skin, hair, and clothing. Food in open markets became contaminated. Milk from local farms carried radioactive iodine. Children played outside for hours, receiving dangerous exposure. Many residents went fishing by the river. Others sunbathed in the warm spring weather. It was a beautiful day, a deadly day. Pripyat was preparing for a celebration. A new amusement park was scheduled to open on May 1st for a holiday festival. Bright yellow Ferris wheels stood ready. Bumper cars waited silently. Colorful decorations were already in place. Children passed by, excited to ride them soon. The park would never open. It would remain frozen in time, a playground for ghosts. Late in the afternoon, authorities finally decided to evacuate the city. The situation could no longer be hidden, but they still avoided telling the truth. Officials announced that residents would leave only temporarily. 3 days, they said. Bring documents, some food and essentials. Leave everything else behind. Most people believed them. Why wouldn't they? This was their home, their city, their entire life. On April 27th, about 36 hours after the explosion, buses began to arrive, hundreds of them. They formed long lines stretching beyond the city. Residents looked out their windows in confusion. Some felt fear for the first time. Others thought it was simply a precaution. Police knocked on doors, instructing people to prepare to leave. "You will return soon," they repeated. Families packed quickly. Documents, photographs, a few clothes, toys for children. Pets were often left behind. Some residents left food on tables, expecting to return in a few days. Plants were watered. Windows were closed. Doors were locked. Many did not even turn off the lights. They believed they were coming back. No one told them they would never see their homes again. As buses filled, a strange silence settled over the city. People looked out the windows at familiar streets, schools, shops, parks, apartments. Some cried quietly. Others stared in disbelief. Children asked when they would come back. Parents had no answers. Columns of buses slowly drove away from Pripyat. Behind them, the city stood empty, but not dead. Radiation remained, invisible and patient. Within hours, Pripyat became a ghost city. Meals sat on tables.
Laundry hung on balconies. Toys lay on floors. Books remained open on desks. Dogs and cats wandered the streets, waiting for owners who would never return. Wind blew through empty buildings. Nature slowly began to reclaim everything. Only later did residents learn the real reason for evacuation. The radiation levels were so high that long-term habitation was impossible. Returning home would mean serious illness or death. Their city was lost forever. Many evacuees carried deep trauma for the rest of their lives. They had not just left houses.
They had lost their past, their memories, their identity. Soon, a large area around the plant was sealed off. Villages were abandoned. Farms were deserted. Forests became contaminated. This area would later be known as the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Even today, much of it remains unsafe for permanent living. Pripyat still stands today, slowly decaying. Windows broken, paint peeling, trees growing through concrete. It is a place where time stopped on April 27, 1986. A reminder of how quickly human civilization can disappear, and how invisible dangers can destroy everything without warning. After the evacuation of Pripyat, the disaster did not end. In many ways, it had only begun. The reactor was still burning. Radiation continued to pour into the air. Contaminated dust spread across land and water. Something had to be done, but machines could not survive near the reactor. Electronics failed almost instantly under the intense radiation. Robots sent to the roof stopped working within minutes. So the Soviet authorities made a terrible decision. If robots could not do the job, humans would. Hundreds of thousands of men were sent to Chernobyl. Soldiers, miners, engineers, firefighters, construction workers, ordinary civilians. They were called liquidators, people assigned to liquidate the consequences of the disaster. Many were young, some were barely adults. Some volunteered, believing they were saving their country. Others were ordered to go. Few truly understood the danger. One of the first tasks was to contain the reactor. Workers began constructing a massive concrete structure around it, later called the sarcophagus. It had to be built quickly. Every hour mattered. Men worked in shifts, exposed to radiation far above safe limits. Protective gear was basic: helmets, gloves, thin lead plates, sometimes improvised protection. Many wore ordinary clothes underneath. Radiation passed through almost everything. Still, they worked, day after day. Helicopters flew directly over the burning reactor. Pilots dropped sand, lead, clay, and boron to try to smother the fire. From above, they could see the glowing core, a terrifying sight. Radiation levels were so high that flight time had to be limited. Even seconds mattered. One helicopter crashed after hitting a crane cable. The crew did not survive. Yet flights continued. Pilots knew the risk. They flew anyway. The roof of Reactor 4 was covered with highly radioactive debris, pieces of graphite and nuclear fuel. As long as it remained there, radiation would continue spreading. The debris had to be removed. Robots were sent first. They failed almost immediately. Radiation destroyed their circuits. So once again, humans were sent. The soldiers assigned to the roof received a grim nickname: bio-robots, biological robots. Their mission was simple: run onto the roof, shovel debris into the hole, run back. Time allowed? About 60 to 90 seconds. Longer exposure could mean certain death. Before each run, officers gave instructions. Do not fall. Do not stop. Do not look around. Do not pick up anything unnecessary. Just run, throw, and return. The path to the roof led through damaged buildings and narrow stairways. Radiation levels increased with every step. Some soldiers reported a strange taste in their mouths. Others felt sudden weakness or dizziness. At the final doorway, an officer watched with a stopwatch. One by one, the men ran out into the open. The roof looked like a battlefield. Black fragments lay everywhere. Some pieces were small, others were heavy blocks. The air shimmered with heat and radiation. Soldiers rushed forward, grabbed debris with shovels, and pushed it over the edge into the reactor. They did not dare stay longer. Many stumbled, some dropped their tools, but they kept moving. When the time was up, they ran back inside, hearts pounding. A whistle blew. Next group. Again and again. To reduce exposure, workers used whatever they could. Lead plates were sewn into uniforms. Pieces of metal were attached to boots. Masks covered their faces. But protection was far from perfect. Radiation found its way through gaps and thin materials. Dosimeters, devices that measure radiation, often reached their maximum reading almost instantly. Some stopped working altogether. When that happened, no one knew how much radiation a person had received. After completing their task, many soldiers were sent away immediately. Some received medals, others received small payments, many received nothing at all. Years later, a large number developed serious health problems: cancer, heart disease, immune disorders, chronic fatigue. Some died young, others lived with lifelong illness. Yet many rarely spoke about what they experienced. Another group of workers faced danger below the reactor. Coal miners were brought in to dig a tunnel under the plant. The goal was to build a cooling system to prevent another explosion. Conditions were brutal. Extreme heat, poor ventilation, radiation exposure. Many miners worked nearly naked because of the temperature. They dug day and night. Their effort helped reduce the risk of further catastrophe. Liquidators also decontaminated villages and farmland. Topsoil was removed and buried. Buildings were washed or demolished. Vehicles were destroyed. Forests were cut down and buried in trenches. Everything that could not be cleaned was simply abandoned. Even animals were killed to prevent the spread of contamination. It was a heartbreaking task. Many liquidators later described their experience as fighting a war. But there was no visible enemy, no gunfire, no explosions, no clear victory. Only an invisible force that attacked silently. Radiation did not care about bravery, strength, or sacrifice. It treated everyone the same. Unlike soldiers in battle, the liquidators received little recognition at the time. Much of their work remained secret for years. Yet their actions prevented a far greater disaster. Without them, large parts of Europe might have become uninhabitable. Millions more lives could have been affected. They saved people they would never meet. For many liquidators, the hardest part came later. Not the physical pain, but the memories, the image of the ruined reactor, the empty city, the knowledge of what they had been exposed to. Some struggled with fear about their health. Others worried about their families and children. Many carried a quiet sense of sacrifice that few people truly understood. Chernobyl showed the limits of technology. When machines failed, human courage took their place. Ordinary people did extraordinary things. Not for fame, not for reward, but because someone had to. The explosion ended in minutes. The fire burned for days, but the consequences would last for generations. Chernobyl did not disappear with time. It became a shadow, long, silent, and impossible to escape. Radioactive materials released into the air did not simply vanish. Some particles settled into soil and water. Others entered plants and animals. Certain radioactive elements can remain dangerous for decades, even centuries. Rain carried contamination into rivers. Wind spread it across countries. Food chains carried it into human bodies. Fields that once grew crops became unsafe. Milk, vegetables, and meat had to be tested for radiation. In some places, restrictions still exist today. Radiation sickness was only the beginning. For many people, the true impact came slowly. Years after the disaster, doctors began to see increased rates of cancer, especially thyroid cancer in children. The thyroid gland absorbs iodine, and radioactive iodine released from the reactor entered the body through food and air. Thousands of young people required surgery. Some survived, some did not. Other illnesses also increased: heart problems, immune disorders, chronic fatigue. Not every case could be directly proven to come from radiation, but the pattern was clear. Something had changed. Physical illness was only part of the suffering. Many survivors carried deep emotional wounds. They had lost homes, communities, and a sense of safety. Some felt anger at the authorities who delayed evacuation. Others struggled with anxiety, depression, or fear about their future. Children who grew up after the disaster were sometimes treated differently, as if they carried something dangerous inside them. The invisible nature of radiation created invisible fear. Yet, in the absence of humans, something unexpected happened. Wildlife began to reclaim the abandoned land. Forests grew thicker. Animals returned. Wolves, deer, wild horses, and birds now roamed areas where cities once stood. Without roads, factories, or hunting, nature found space to recover. Scientists still debate how radiation affects these animals. Some appear healthy. Others show signs of mutation or reduced lifespan. Chernobyl became a strange experiment, a place where human absence allowed nature to grow again. A large area around the reactor was permanently closed to normal life. This became known as the exclusion zone. Entry required special permission. Military checkpoints controlled access. Entire villages remained empty, slowly collapsing into ruins. Personal belongings still lay inside homes. Photographs faded on walls. Clocks stopped at the time people left. Toys gathered dust. It was as if time itself had frozen. The original concrete structure built around the reactor was not meant to last forever. Over the years, it began to weaken. To prevent further danger, An enormous new steel structure was constructed, the new safe confinement. It was slid into place over the damaged reactor like a giant shield. This project took years and involved international cooperation. The goal was to contain radiation and allow future dismantling of the reactor remains. Even today, the work is not finished. In recent years, guided tours have allowed visitors into parts of the exclusion zone. Tourists walk through abandoned streets of Pripyat. They see empty schools, silent hospitals, and rusting amusement rides. Radiation levels in many areas are now low enough for short visits. Yet the atmosphere remains heavy, quiet, uneasy, haunting. Many visitors describe a feeling that words cannot fully express, a sense of standing in a place where something terrible happened and still lingers. Chernobyl is not only about technology or disaster. It is about people. Firefighters who rushed into danger, workers who risked their lives to contain the reactor, families forced to abandon everything they owned, children who grew up with the consequences. Their stories remind us that progress without caution can have terrible costs. Chernobyl changed how the world thinks about nuclear energy and safety. It revealed how dangerous secrecy can be during a crisis. It showed that invisible threats can be as deadly as visible ones, and it proved that ordinary people can show extraordinary courage. Pripyat still stands, empty but not forgotten. Trees grow through broken pavement. Buildings crumble slowly under wind and rain. The Ferris wheel, once meant to bring joy, turns only in the imagination. If you listen carefully, you might almost hear echoes of the past. Children laughing, music playing, life continuing as it once did. But those sounds exist only in memory. Chernobyl is a warning, a reminder of human ambition and human error, a story of tragedy, sacrifice, and resilience. It shows how fragile our world can be and how strong people can be when facing the unimaginable. For those who lived through it, April 26, 1986 never really ended. It continued in hospital rooms, empty homes, memorials, and memories. It lives in photographs of a city that no longer exists as it once did. It lives in the quiet forests that now cover abandoned streets, and it lives in the lessons passed to future generations. Chernobyl was not just a moment in history, it was a turning point, a night when the modern world discovered that some disasters do not end when the flames go out. They continue, silently, invisibly, patiently, shaping lives long after the headlines fade. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: even in the darkest events, human courage shines. Not loud, not proud, but steady, like a small light that refuses to go out.